Welcome everyone, this is Pinnacle Professional College and today we'll be continuing our analysis on HPC Limited. We've done part 1, part 2. It's important to go watch part 1, part 2 of this analysis so that you understand exactly where we are heading towards. So today we'll be talking about quality control and all other issues. And so let's dive in real quick. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. So let's talk about quality control. We know that quality control is one of the critical success factors for thriving in this particular industry, right? So this particular paragraph on quality control is basically talking about, undertaking of quality checks and ensuring that agricultural produce goes through the right, quality procedures before it's sold to the customer. It's very, very important. In ensuring quality, it requires some form of technology. It also requires some form of great packaging. So here we are trying to understand what are the possible packaging materials that can be used for ensuring that will ensure the right quality. Now let's move on to marketing because we have a lot to do today. Let's move on to marketing. Now, when we talk about marketing of products, right, you cannot talk about marketing without understanding the 4 Ps. The 4 Ps of product, place, price, and promotion. Marketing revolves around promotion, right? Marketing revolves around promotion. So we are told here the availability, high costs, and appropriateness of packaging material for product shelf life are the main challenges confronting local processors in marketing their products. Right. So here we see some threats. Right. These are the main challenges: availability, high cost. Marketing is high. We were told that foreign companies are able to pay for high advertising cost on radio just because they have the financial leverage to do so. Imported fruit juices are usually packaged in Tetra packs and have a shelf life of about 1 year. Shelf life of about 1 year. So you might want to understand what is a Tetra pack. What is a Tetra pack? A Tetra pack is basically a pack that is like it's a type of plasticized carton. Right? It's a type of plasticized carton that we use to package things like milk, juice, and other drinks, right? So it's like a carton, but it's like plasticized in the form of a plastic. So that's something to keep in mind, and it helps improve the shelf life of the product. The local products packaged in glass and PET bottles have shelf lives of 6 months. So you see the Tetra packs are better in terms of shelf lives. As for PET bottles, I think it takes 2 weeks. Also, the local products have high volume content but low packaging. One of the key things that's important for organizations is how they package. It's a part of promotion. It's a promotional tool. It's a marketing effort to package your product properly. There are 2 sides to a product: the content and the packaging. Your content might be great, but the packaging is poor. It will not go far. It will not go far. So that's something to keep in mind. Or remember the 4 Ps, because this particular section is particularly talking about promotion or marketing, right? We are told here that a few exports have been undertaken on the regional market, mainly through trade shows. Less than 1% of concentrates produced are sold locally to alcoholic beverage companies. There are also buying criteria to meet: quality of product, price, consistency, and timely delivery of supply volume. So when a customer wants to buy the product, these are some of the things they look at, right? And if you want to be competitive in the industry, then you must look at quality, price, consistency, and supply of volumes. Very, very important. Very, very important. Okay. So please note the 4 Ps. Please note the 4 Ps. I've already given you some models to look at. On this channel, I have a video on strategic models to know before you get into your exam. If you haven't looked at it, please do so. Types of packaging material. As we already mentioned, that we have the glass bottle, the PET bottle, right? The PET bottle, you have Tetra Pak, and you have the standard pouch, right? So all these different packaging have their own advantages and disadvantages. Have their own advantages and disadvantages. And so you might ask, what is the PET bottle? First of all, let's explain what the PET bottle is. So PET, it literally stands for, it has a scientific name, which means polyethylene terephthalate. Polyethylene terephthalate. So it's basically a form of polyester. It's basically a form of polyester of some sort. It's basically a form of polyester. It's more like it's a recyclable and lightweight bottle. It's a recyclable and lightweight bottle. So that's what we mean by PET bottle. That's what we mean by PET bottle. It's very, very important. Very, very important. It's a form of polyester. It's a form. So it is extruded or molded into plastic bottles and containers for packaging foods and beverages. All right. And it could also be used for personal care products. It's molded into plastic bottles, basically. So let's start with glass bottle. Glass bottle is not easily available. It comes with high costs. It's risky in handling. The logistics in distribution are very expensive because it's glass and it's delicate. The PET bottle is not expensive. It can be recycled, but it's not environmentally friendly. The Tetra Pak, we are told that it's not easily available and expensive, not environmentally friendly, and can be recycled. The standard pouch, we are told certain things about it. Now, the main things about this packaging material, when I see this packaging material characteristics, then I know that going forward, this might be a decision point for HPC around what is the effective packaging material that would deliver the necessary marketing, the necessary shelf life, and the necessary packaging that they need to deliver their products. Because some are expensive, some are not. Some can be recycled, some can be not. So, which particular packaging material do they go with, and how would that affect, customer reception of their products? It's very, very important. Now, here we have some challenges in the fruit processing industry. Some challenges. We are told some of the challenges, and these challenges would be threats to the industry, right? One of the key things that we discussed from the beginning, which I'll touch on a few, is the capacity constraints. So here we are told that most processing companies are producing below the capacity of the processing equipment. They are producing below the capacity of the processing equipment. So the result is low volumes. So you have low volumes at a high production cost. Low volumes at a high production cost. So there's no economies of scale here. There's no economies of scale here. So local fruit juice will therefore become more expensive, right? In economics, there's something we call economies of scale. Economies of scale. And I do not want to take you through an economics class, but an economies of scale is basically cost advantages that companies experience when production becomes efficient, right? And what does that mean? It means that costs can be spread over a large amount of goods, right? So the average cost per unit heavily declines. But in this case, because there are capacity constraints, you have low volumes at high production costs, and therefore it makes local juice more expensive than imported ones. More expensive than imported ones. And so you see that foreign competition would definitely kick the local companies out. So that's a threat. That's a threat. In the second paragraph, so the first threat is around high costs, high costs in terms of which is related to capacity constraints or capacity issues. Another issue is absence of skilled staff and those who are not adequately trained for the job in the local processing companies, right? So two things around equipment and people. Now, if you move on to the second paragraph, the recent introduction of the 50% reduction in the benchmark port value on selected import items is set to worsen the plight of local fruit juice processing companies. So this is a policy initiative that is going to worsen the plight of local fruit juice processing companies, because there's a recent introduction of the 50% reduction in benchmark port value on selected import items, including fruit juice. So here, if you look at it from an external point of view, as a policy initiative, as an economic or political factor, then you can see that government is making a decision to reduce the benchmark port value, and that's going to make it cheaper for foreign fruit processing companies to come into the country. And we are told the reason why. It's set to worsen the plight of local fruit juice processing companies due to imported products benefiting from lower tariffs. And that's a huge problem. That's going to be a huge problem for local food processing companies. If you move on to, so that's something to keep in mind. A government initiative is literally favoring foreign companies over local companies. So that's a huge threat. That's a huge threat. Another hindering factor is also high utility bills as well. It was also observed that Ghana's proximity to the EU market should offer cheap free charges on export of processed fruits when compared to other regions of the world. Processing plants are located near production areas, making it easier to source fruit processing. So basically, what we are getting from this is, because I'm touching on key points here, what we are getting from this is there's high costs of production due to capacity issues, limited supply of skilled labor, a government intervention that has reduced port value for about 50% to foreign companies, or foreign fruit companies. There are also availability of improved, it says that if you look at this paragraph, there are availability of improved seeds and new varieties and research on good agricultural practices and pest and disease control. The ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme, once put in place, will allow for duty-free access to the regional market. There's an increasing demand in local and sub-regional markets, and growing incomes and middle class in Ghana brings more opportunities. So as I was reading it, you can clearly tell that there's an opportunity. There's demand. There's demand for these fruit products. There's growing demand in Europe for fresh and processed fruits. So you can see clearly that there's a growing demand, which we've talked about in prior episodes. However, imported fruit juices with favorable tariffs are cheaper than locally processed goods. So you see, imported ones are cheaper. Why? Because government has given them some form of tariff reduction that allows them to, to operate at a cheaper rate. Now, what are the recommendations? What are some of the recommendations? Now, these recommendations are quite self-explanatory, so I will touch on a few that I believe to be very, very critical. On the basis of the analysis presented here, there's the need for HPC to take the necessary steps to address the challenges identified. So on the economic side, on the economics of the raw material, which is the supply and demand, it means that HPC must work closely with producers, which we've mentioned, right? Work closely with producers to get a steady supply of raw materials. Another recommendation is around control of pests and diseases. And HPC must come up with very effective control measures to ensure disease-free fruits, basically. And this is in line with quality control. Quality control. Another recommendation would be enhancements in skills of the people who are, working for HPC. Enhancements in skills. So these are some of the recommendations outlined by the case, outlined by the pre-sim material. I will go ahead and look for extra recommendations. Look for extra recommendations. So another recommendation that comes to mind is to expand the capacity of HPC as a company to be able to, produce more. And also, another thing that also comes to mind is, should HPC itself go into actual growing of fruit produce, or they should wait on suppliers to provide them with that? Because you would want to have control over the supply chain, right? So should HPC go into the actual growing of produce so that they are not so dependent on smallholder farms? Now let's look at the board of directors. Very, very important. Let's look at the board of directors. Now, let me say this. Now, when you're looking at board of directors, there are a couple of things that you need to look at. You need to look at experience, skill. You need to look at industry knowledge. I also need to look at how qualified the person is, right? So let's look to see if, the board of directors have what it takes to run this company and whether any inclusions are necessary going forward. He's 64 years old. So Mawunyo is 64 years old with about 40 years working experience in the agro-processing industry. So this is a very, very experienced person in the industry. He holds a degree in industrial engineering from the University of Manchester and an MBA in entrepreneurship from the University of Hull. He has served in several capacities. So Mawunyo certainly is a very experienced person, and he seems to have what it takes to be chairman of the board. Now let's move on to Hetty Suman. And she is the CEO, and she's been CEO from the inception of the company. So she's seen the different stages of the company. She has experience of the company from its inception, right? But one of the things that is important here is sometimes organizations will require fresh ideas. Sometimes what the leaders that bring the organization to a certain point are not the leaders to take them into the future. So that's a question to be answered. So she's a food and nutrition specialist, and she's 56, has over 10 years of experience. She's very well experienced. She's very, very well experienced and has a bit of international exposure because she did an MBA at the University of Ibadan. Yeah, so that's the CEO for you. What is important to do as you go through this list is to assess the downsides and the upsides of each person and see how that will contribute to HPC's progress. Mr. Bafo Yadom Boachi, who is a non-executive director, Now, who is a non-executive director? Very, very important. Who is a non-executive director? It's important to know that because so a non-executive director is basically a member of a company's board of directors who is not part of the executive team, which means that they do not engage in the day-to-day management of the organization, but they are involved in policy making and planning exercises, right? So Mr. Bafor Yadom as a non-executive director, he's not involved in the day-to-day running of the company, right? So he holds a Master of Science in Biological Science in Public Health from Oxford University and a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry and Pharmacology from the University of Southampton. Mr. Bafor Yadom, 36 years old, was appointed to HPC's board on 2nd November 2014. So we are only told of his qualifications here, nothing really about experience. So I'm curious to understand why he is a non-executive director. Richmond Addo is also a non-executive director, right? Richmond Addo is a corporate lawyer in South Africa specializing in consumer law, document review, and coding. He holds a law degree from the University of Ghana and a bachelor's degree in business administration and computer science from KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. Mr. Richmond Addo was appointed to the HPC board in 2017 and is 42 years old. So he is a corporate lawyer. The case didn't say what's the length of his experience, but it seems like he has a substantial amount of experience in the legal space, and he probably was brought in as a non-executive director to contribute to the legal side of issues. Mark Wistete is also a non-executive director. He's an investment analyst, chartered accountant with focus on venture capital and private equity. He holds an executive MBA from GIMPA, and he holds an MSc in accounting and finance from UPSC. He's 39 years old. Again, I would have loved to see the length of experience and what they've been doing. Mr. Seth Ashi is a financial analyst on the Ghana Stock Exchange. He's 33 years old and holds an MBA in financial and engineering and a professional accounting qualification from the ICAG, Ghana. So these are the non-executive directors, right? These are the non-executive directors. So one key thing for me is to, what is the merits of their qualification that gives them the opportunity to sit as non-executive directors. I would have loved to see more around the experiences, etc. And so maybe in the exam they'll tell us more about them, and maybe they'll even include somebody else as a twist to the case. Anything can happen in the exam, so I'll just prepare for that. Management team, we have Lani Kato. He's a CEO. He's been in the food and beverage industry for over 20 years and has worked in various capacities in Ghana. So this guy clearly has operational experience. Miss Celestine Obuade is an accountant, part qualified student, writing the final examination. Prior to becoming a she worked as an internal auditor at the University of Cape Coast for 2 years. Miss Celestine doesn't seem like someone who has extensive experience. She doesn't seem like someone who has extensive experience. So I'm curious to understand how she's running the numbers at HPC. She's only been an internal auditor at the University of Cape Coast for 2 years and then became the accountant. So it doesn't look like she has tons of experience. So I'm curious to see, how she goes about her accounting duties. Miss Flora Asamoah, who is a quality assurance officer, has a bachelor's of BSc in food science. She previously worked as a regulatory officer with the Foods and Drugs Authority as a quality assurance executive. So she seems to have some past experience in the quality space. Now let's move on to the business environment. Now, these three sections, business environment, economic performance, and COVID, please note them very carefully because they are going to come in very handy. Very, very handy, right? So let's start with, let's start with business environment. Ghana continues to enjoy relative peace and stability. So we are looking at the pestle framework here: political factors, economic, socio-cultural, technological, ecological, and legal. We are looking at the business environment here, right? Ghana is peaceful. Everything seems fine. But one of the key things that has affected businesses is COVID-19, and so previously the economy was strengthened by relatively sound macroeconomic management and competitive business environment. But in recent months, the system has suffered a recession due to the COVID-19. So please think about a question around COVID-19 and its impact. Please think about it. Right, so let's move on to economic performance. The economic growth of Ghana has been very slow due to the COVID-19. So you see the repetition of COVID-19 here. It is estimated that the growth will accelerate strongly next year as domestic and external demand strengthen. So COVID-19 has impacted economic performance. Very, very important. So first of all, we would want to understand what measures HPC can put in place to be able to manage this recessionary period. And going forward, in case there are any shocks to the economy like that, how would HPC be able to withstand it? That's a question to answer. We are told about the impact of COVID-19. We all know how COVID-19 has affected companies worldwide. So the pandemic resulted in a drastic fall in the demand for HPC products due to the economic uncertainty and changing consumer behavior. Restriction on movement and social distance discouraged most consumers from patronizing goods and services. Also, the company's supply chain was disrupted due to government restriction on movement. So because of the whole COVID-19, there was, social distancing and all of that. So a lot of companies went digital. Now, we need to understand how HPC is marketing their products to the consumer. Are they still using the supermarket approach, or they are, using digitization to get their products to the customer? Very, very important. Very, very important. So we would want to see HPC move on to some form of digitization and marketing their products online, because social distancing and all of that during COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way we buy products. Suppliers were not able to meet. It says also the company supply chain was disrupted due to government restriction. So you see the supply chain has also been affected. So it's important, it might be important for HPC to think about growing their own produce. I mean, this will be a long-term project, but it will be a good head start. Suppliers were not able to meet companies' demand for raw material for production. Finally, the pandemic has led to an increase in the cost of production and other input due to market volatility and product unavailability. So these are all issues that came with the COVID-19. I will take each of these issues and try to find solutions to them, because that will essentially help HPC. So number one would be digital markets and getting the product to customers using technology, online advertising, and online distribution. Also HPC thinking of growing their own products so that they don't have to depend on smallholder farms, right? Another thing would be HPC putting long-term plans in place to be able to withstand shocks to the economy. So this is a brief analysis for the last part of the case. If you haven't watched my video on strategic models to know before you go into the exam, please do so. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. And thank you for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.